Hi, my name is David, and I'm 67 years old. I thought it was just another quiet evening until the waitress slipped a folded napkin onto my plate. Her hands shook, her eyes begged me not to react. Inside were words that froze me. "There, watching you. Don't trust the manager." She didn't know the truth. She was warning the very billionaire who owned everything around her. Before I reveal how one trembling note changed the course of my life and exposed corruption worth millions, I want to ask you something. If you discovered a secret that could cost you your job or even your safety, would you risk everything to speak out? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. My name is David Caldwell, and despite what the world thinks of me, I've never been one for luxury. People see the billionaire, the newspaper headlines, the corporate empire, but few see the man behind it. The widower, the father, the lonely soul who built walls of glass and steel around himself, only to find them hollow inside. My wealth came from decades of relentless work in hospitality, steakhouses, luxury hotels, chains across the globe. To the outside world, I'm the man who dines with prime ministers and celebrities, the man whose name is etched in gold above grand entrances. But to me, all of that is just noise. What matters now in these final chapters of my life is truth. And truth rarely shows itself in boardrooms or balance sheets. It hides in whispers, in the weary eyes of workers who serve quietly, unnoticed. That night I wanted to see my empire from the ground level, not through polished reports, but through lived reality. I dressed simply, worn jacket, scuffed shoes, a cap pulled low. To anyone glancing my way, I was just another quiet diner slipping into a corner booth. The staff didn't recognize me. That was the point. The restaurant glowed with the polished charm of success, chandeliers casting soft light over mahogany tables, the sizzle of steaks drifting from the kitchen, wine glasses catching reflections like shards of colored glass. Guests laughed, forks clinked, and in the air was the practiced illusion of perfection. But I wasn't here for the illusion. I was here for the truth beneath it. That's when I noticed her. The waitress who approached my table looked young, no older than her mid-20s. Her uniform was crisp, but her shoes betrayed her, worn thin at the heels, scuffed from long hours. She balanced the tray with practiced grace, but there was a heaviness in her eyes, the kind that comes from carrying burdens too large for such small shoulders. "Good evening, sir," she said softly, placing the menu before me. Her voice trembled almost imperceptibly, as if she was reciting lines she'd practiced 1,000 times. "Thank you," I replied, studying her more closely than I probably should have. Her name tag read Sophie. I watched as she moved between tables, always polite, always careful, but never at ease. And hovering nearby, like a hawk waiting for prey, was the restaurant manager, Victor. His tailored suit and polished shoes didn't match the scowl on his face. He barked orders at staff, his words sharp enough to cut. When Sophie hesitated, for even a second, his hand clenched into a fist at his side. Something was wrong. I could feel it. When Sophie returned to take my order, Victor lingered close behind, his presence pressing down on her like a weight. I ordered simply a steak, medium rare with a glass of red wine. Sophie nodded, scribbling quickly, and turned to leave, but Victor's eyes followed her every step, a silent threat in their glare. I sat back, my instincts prickling. Years of business had taught me how to read people, their tells, their hidden motives. Sophie was hiding something, and Victor knew it. When she came back with the wine, she leaned slightly closer than necessary, her hands shaking just enough to make the glass tremble. She set it down carefully, her fingers brushing the edge of the plate, and then, so quickly, I almost missed it. She slid a folded napkin beside my fork, her eyes flicked up to mine, wide and pleading before darting away. I didn't touch the napkin immediately. I'd let it sit there, innocuous, while she walked away, her back stiff, as if every step was a battle against fear. Victor passed behind her, his eyes scanning the tables, his jaw tight. Only when I was certain no one was watching did I unfold the napkin under the table. The words inside made my blood run cold. "They're watching you. Don't trust the manager. The kitchen is not safe. Check the ledger in his office. Please help us." My fingers tightened on the paper. Around me the restaurant hummed with laughter and the clatter of silverware, but all I could hear were those desperate words echoing in my head. In that moment, my disguise wasn't just a curiosity, it was a shield. Sophie didn't know I was David Caldwell, the man whose name was on the sign above the door. To her, I was just another customer, perhaps her last chance to get the truth out. What she couldn't know was that she had just handed her life, and possibly mine, into the fire. And I wasn't going to walk away. The napkin felt heavier than paper should. My hands, steady in boardrooms where billions shifted with a signature, trembled as I read the hurried scrawl again. "They're watching you. Don't trust the manager. The kitchen is not safe. Check the ledger in his office. Please, help us." Every word carried urgency, desperation. I slipped the napkin into my pocket, heart pounding, eyes scanning the restaurant. Sophie moved about with forced normalcy, balancing trays, smiling faintly at guests. But I noticed the way her hands trembled when Victor passed, the way her shoulders stiffened under his gaze. Victor loomed nearby, his attention sharper than any maitre d's should be. He barked at a busboy for stacking glasses too loudly, then whispered something in Sophie's ear that made her flinch. She nodded quickly, eyes cast downward. I took a sip of wine to steady myself. It tasted fine, rich even, but now doubt poisoned. The flavor. What if her warning was literal? What if the kitchen truly wasn't safe? I waved Sophie over with a calm smile. She approached cautiously, glancing at Victor before leaning in. "Is everything to your satisfaction, sir?" she asked, her voice rehearsed but her eyes pleading. I spoke softly. "The wine is fine, but—" "Sophie, are you all right?" Her lips parted, surprise flashing across her face. She quickly shook her head. "Please," she whispered so faintly. I barely caught it. "Don't say my name. Don't let him see us talking." Before I could respond, Victor appeared, his smile practiced, but his eyes sharp. "Everything all right here, sir?" I leaned back, feigning indifference. "Perfectly fine. The young lady's doing well." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. He lingered a moment too long before walking away. Sophie exhaled slowly, her hands tightening on the tray. She whispered, almost inaudible, "Please, just read the note, and be careful." Then she hurried away, her steps clipped with urgency. The rest of the evening felt like a masquerade. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, but beneath it ran an undercurrent of menace. I kept replaying her words, her fear. I was no stranger to corruption. In my world, I'd seen embezzlement, backroom deals, even sabotage. But this was different. This was inside my own empire, and it was being risked to me not by auditors or lawyers, but by a trembling waitress who had everything to lose. And somehow, I already knew. I couldn't ignore it. I left the restaurant that night with more than just the taste of steak lingering on my tongue. The napkin's message burned in my pocket, heavier with every step. Back in my car, I read it again under the dim glow of the dashboard light. "They're watching you. Don't trust the manager." My instinct screamed to act immediately, to storm back inside and demand answers. But instinct had to bow to wisdom. If Sophie was right, Victor was dangerous, maybe even protected by something larger than himself. Exposing my identity too soon would ruin everything and possibly put her in greater danger. I sat in the dark, weighing my options. Walk away, dismiss it as paranoia from an overworked waitress, or dig deeper, risk my cover, risk my safety, to uncover what was really happening under my roof. Sophie's eyes haunted me, wide, pleading, filled with a quiet courage that reminded Me of my late wife. Emily had once said, "Courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just doing the right thing even when your hands shake." Sophie's hands had shaken, but she still slipped me that note. That was courage. I couldn't ignore her. The next day I returned to the restaurant unannounced, still in my disguise. This time I lingered, watching the staff more closely. I saw Victor's control, how he berated busboys, how he hovered near. Sophie, how other waiters avoided his eyes like beaten dogs. At one point, I saw Victor corner Sophie by the service door, his voice low and threatening. I couldn't hear his words, but I saw the way she shrank back, her knuckles white against the tray she clutched. That decided it. This wasn't paranoia. This was fear. Real fear. I left quietly, my mind made up. Sophie had asked for help, and I, disguised or not, was the only one in a position to give it. But I also knew one thing. If I was to uncover the truth, I'd have to play this game carefully. One wrong move and Victor would know. One slip and Sophie's bravery would cost her more than her job. As I drove away, the city lights blurred past the windows. I whispered to myself, "All right, Victor, let's see what you're hiding." The hunt had begun. I couldn't sleep that night. The city outside my penthouse windows shimmered with neon and noise, but my thoughts stayed chained to a single folded napkin and the eyes of a trembling waitress. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. This wasn't a matter for accountants or auditors. It was personal. If Sophie was right, corruption had sunk its teeth into my empire, and if she was wrong, she'd risked her livelihood for nothing. Either way, I owed her the truth. I phoned. My most trusted ally, Marcus Reed, my COO for 20 years. He knew me better than anyone alive, but even Marcus couldn't know everything. So, for now, I gave him only part of the story. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice level, "I need an unmarked team. No company logos, no chatter through official channels, discreet surveillance on the flagship steakhouse." There was a pause. "Are you expecting trouble?" "I'm expecting answers," I replied. By mid-afternoon, I was back at the restaurant. But not as a customer. This time I wore a janitor's uniform, complete with cap and mop bucket. My reflection in the bathroom mirror was almost unrecognizable. Hunched shoulders, tired eyes, the perfect image of someone invisible. Exactly what I needed to be. From the corner of the dining room, I watched. Victor strutted across the floor, like a king in his castle. The waitstaff avoided his gaze, their smiles brittle, their movements mechanical. Sophie worked silently, her face a mask, but every so often her eyes flicked toward me. I didn't acknowledge her, but I noticed. She hadn't given up hope. I pushed my mop through the hall toward the back offices. Victor's office door loomed at the end of the corridor, polished wood with a brass handle. Locked, of course. That's where Marcus's unmarked team came in. A man named Wren, ex-military, skilled in locks and subtle entries, slipped in under the guise of a delivery driver. Within minutes, the lock clicked. Inside, the office smelled of cologne and stale. Cigar smoke. Papers cluttered the desk, but it was the cabinet in the corner that drew Wren's attention. He knelt, his tools clicking softly. Another lock gave way. There it was, a ledger. Thick, bound, its pages filled with neat handwriting and numbers that made my stomach knot. Shipments recorded from companies I didn't recognize, invoices far above standard rates, coded initials beside payments. Worse, notes about cuts to food quality, substitutions, even deliberate shortcuts that endangered health. Wren snapped photos with a concealed camera. "This isn't just skimming," he murmured. "This is organized theft." I flipped to the most recent entry. A supplier listed as Golden Crest Meats, payment 5 times market value. Next to it, a note scrawled in haste. "Deliver batch by Friday. Victor guaranteed approval. Golden Crest didn't exist in any of our official supplier networks. Someone was laundering money through ghosts." I closed the ledger, my pulse hammering. Sophie had been right, and she'd been braver than I'd realized. We left the office untouched, the lock reset behind us. As I pushed my mop bucket down the hall, Victor's voice echoed behind me. Orders doubled for tomorrow. Make sure nobody asks questions. My disguise hid my expression, but inside I was seething. The truth was out there. Now I had to decide what to do with it. The next evening, I returned again. Disguise intact, patience sharpened. This time, I watched Victor more closely. He met with two men in dark suits near the kitchen door, their conversation low, their hands exchanging a thick envelope. When Sophie passed too close, Victor snapped at her harshly, shoving her tray. Glasses shattered. "You're clumsy, worthless," he hissed. "One more mistake and you're finished." Sophie bent quickly to clean up, her face pale, but I saw the tears glinting in her eyes. My fists clenched around the mop handle. Later, I slipped outside, tailing the suited men as they left. Ren followed discreetly, snapping photos of license plates. The trail led to a warehouse on the city's edge, a shell company registered under false names. Inside, shipments of low-grade meat were repackaged and relabeled, destined for my restaurants at premium prices. It wasn't just corruption. It was endangerment. Customers trusted my brand for quality. Now Victor was poisoning that trust, lining his pockets and hiding behind the illusion of excellence. But it wasn't just him. The documents tied payments to offshore accounts, initials, linking back to suppliers in 3 different states. This wasn't a lone wolf. It was a network, and Sophie, she was the only one who dared whisper the truth. When I returned to the restaurant, I caught her briefly by the coffee station. She avoided my eyes, but I murmured under my breath, "You were right. I saw the ledger." Her head snapped up, panic flashing. "Please, don't tell him. If he finds out, I'm done. My brother, he needs me." Her voice cracked, but before I could reply, Victor's shadow fell across the hall. He barked at Sophie to move faster, his eyes narrowing at me for lingering. Smiled blandly, wheeled my mop away, but inside a storm raged. It was no longer about one corrupt manager. It was about saving the people who kept my empire alive, and I wasn't going to stop until every name in that ledger was brought into the light. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Victor wasn't just exploiting my restaurant. He was the linchpin of a sprawling network siphoning millions through ghost suppliers. I had evidence, yes, but paper alone wouldn't bring him down. I needed to catch him in the act. That's when I decided it was time for a sting. With Marcus's help, I assembled a small team of investigators, legal advisors, and 2 retired federal agents. We mapped Victor's patterns when he met couriers, how he handled shipments, where the money flowed. Every detail painted the picture of a man drunk on power, certain no one was watching. He was wrong. We planted hidden cameras in the office and kitchen, disguised as smoke detectors and clock faces. Ren embedded a microphone under Victor's desk, synced to a transmitter that relayed to a nearby van. The next delivery from Golden Crest Meats was our chance. The night it happened, I returned again in disguise, mop in hand, blending into the background. Sophie caught my eye once, her lips trembling as if to ask what was happening. I gave the faintest nod. It was enough. The delivery men arrived just past 9, lugging crates into the back kitchen. Victor met them personally, clipboard in hand, his signature scrawl marking the fake invoices. "Payments inside," Victor muttered, sliding an envelope into one man's pocket. Click. Every word captured on our hidden mic. The men joked crudely about how easy the scam was, how the old man at the top was too blind to notice. I felt my blood boil, but I stayed put, sweeping the same square of floor, every nerve burning. Then came the final act. One of the men handed Victor a second envelope, this one thicker. He opened it, leafed through stacks of cash and laughed. Pleasure doing business. That was the moment I gave the signal. The back doors burst open. Agents swarmed in, badges flashing. Federal investigation. Nobody move. Chaos erupted. Staff screamed. Dishes clattered. Sophie froze mid-step, her tray nearly falling. Victor spun, his face draining of color. "What is this?" he snarled, but the evidence was already in their hands. The money, the crates, the invoices. I stepped forward, pulling off the janitor's cap. Gasps rippled through the room as staff realized who I was. Sophie's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. "Mr. Caldwell?" she whispered. Victor's expression twisted from shock to rage. You've been spying. I've been watching." I cut him off coldly. "Watching while you bled my business dry and endangered everyone under this roof." The agents cuffed him as he spat curses, his threats echoing uselessly down the hall. The delivery men tried to bolt, but were tackled before they made it out the door. The restaurant that night was no longer filled with laughter. It was filled with the sound of justice catching up. Sophie stood frozen, the napkin in her hand like a relic of everything that had led to this. You were the billionaire all along," she said, her voice breaking. I nodded, meeting her tearful eyes. "And you were the only one brave enough to tell me the truth." The sting was over, but the story wasn't. In the weeks that followed, the scandal tore through headlines. Victor was charged with fraud, money laundering, and endangerment. The network of ghost suppliers crumbled under investigation. For the first time in years, my restaurants ran clean, every shipment verified, every invoice transparent. But the true victory wasn't in the courts or the boardrooms, it was in Sophie. I called her into my office one afternoon, sunlight streaming through the glass walls. She sat nervously, twisting her hands, expecting perhaps reprimand or dismissal. Instead, I placed a folder before her. Inside was a scholarship offer for her younger brother's medical care, fully funded. And beside it, an employment contract, her. Choice of role anywhere in my company, from management training to creative development. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't understand. Why me? Because you risked everything, I said simply. You saw wrong and chose to act. That makes you the kind of person this company needs, and the kind of person the world needs more of. She pressed a hand to her mouth, sobbing quietly, but there was relief in her tears. As she left my office, I caught my reflection in the glass. For years, I had thought my empire was built on numbers, profits, expansions. But Sophie had reminded me of something far more important. It had to be built on people, on courage, on truth. And for the first time in decades, I felt proud, not of what I had built, but of what I had protected. The restaurant felt different after that night, not just cleaner, not just safer, but alive again. The staff walked with lighter steps, laughter returned to the kitchen, and Sophie smiled without fear shadowing her eyes. One evening, weeks later, I dined there openly as myself, no disguise, no pretense. Customers turned their heads, whispers, following me, but I didn't care. Sophie passed my table, confident now, her brother recovering thanks to the care he deserved. She met my eyes, and for the first time there was no plea in them, only gratitude and strength. I thought back to that folded napkin, the shaky handwriting that had pulled me into a world of betrayal and courage. It had been such a small act, easily ignored, but it had changed everything, for me, for her, for everyone under my roof, and it left me with one unshakable truth. Empires don't crumble from competition, they crumble from within, when courage is silenced. Sophie had refused to be silent, so I ask you, if you saw injustice staring you in the face, would you stay quiet, or would you risk everything to do what's right? Let me know in the comments below. And if Sophie's story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more true stories that remind us. Sometimes the smallest act of bravery can bring down the biggest lies.